All right, let's bring in Senator Tom Cotton, member of the Joint Economic Committee. A lot going on down in D.C. today. Good morning to you, Senator.
Good morning, Ainsley.
Good morning. So Mark was just talking about the $1.9 trillion COVID-19 relief bill. I know that you have a problem with this because of all the things that the Democrats have rammed in there, including $270 million for arts, $200 million for museums, $50 million for family planning funding, $112 million for BART funding, which is the Bay Area Rapid Transit.
Minimum wage.
And minimum wage, that's right.
Yeah, I think we know now why the Democrats decided to make this a partisan bill, didn't want to cooperate with Republicans, even though we worked on a bipartisan basis last year to pass 5 bills. It's been almost $4 trillion to help our country get through this pandemic. It's because they want to use the coronavirus pandemic as an excuse to fulfill a lot of long-standing liberal priorities. If you recall, Nancy Pelosi did this last March. She put the brakes on a bill that ultimately passed unanimously, but we had to spin our wheels for a couple days because Nancy Pelosi wanted money for some of the exact kind of things you just mentioned. I mean, like, what does mass transit in San Francisco have to do with a global pandemic? It has nothing to do with it. It only has to do with Nancy Pelosi getting an earmark for her district, which this bill does across the country, bringing back earmarks of the kinds that Republicans have banned for a decade so we don't have more bridges to nowhere.
Yeah, and this did not have to be, this could have been bipartisan. The other rescue bills were bipartisan, and there was a group of senators, you weren't among them, that said, all right, how about $680 billion? They went and met with the president. That seemed to have gone by the boards. Don't forget, we also put money aside for Native American language preservation. As you know, that has everything to do with the pandemic. We're also going to put $1.5 million for the Seawall International Bridge that connects New York to Canada, which, by the way, no one's allowed to go into Canada back and forth. You're only allowed to go through our southern border, but that's for a different conversation. But, Senator, you're looking to propose a minimum wage increase, just not up to $15, right?
Yeah, that's exactly right. Mitt Romney and I have been working on a bill. We hope to release it sometime in the days ahead. Obviously, the votes are not there for $15 an hour minimum wage, but we'd like to see American workers get a wage increase. We'd like to see it go to American workers, though. That's why we also pair it with the mandatory E-Verify program, so every business across the country will have to verify that its employees are legally authorized to work in the United States. We take further steps to try to mitigate the impact on small businesses and so forth. Well, it's going to be below 15, but it's going to be sizable, Brian. It's going to be a real increase in real terms when it's inflation adjusted from the last time Congress passed the minimum wage increase in 2009. We're still talking to some other senators about all the details, but we want to make sure that Americans get a good wage increase, that only Americans get it, that it doesn't happen until the pandemic is over, and that we take steps to mitigate the impact on the smallest businesses.
Exactly.
Okay.
Walmart announced last week they're going to start paying $15 per hour to their employees, but they're a big company. Whereas the small businesses, the Congressional Budget Office has estimated that if it went through, at least 1 million people would lose their jobs, and that seems to defeat the purpose. Meanwhile, today, some of the Biden administration's executive orders are taking effect regarding immigration. The Washington Post has an editorial headline that says, Biden is moving to end Trump's inhumane border policies. Can he avoid triggering a new migrant surge? And that really is a question, Senator, because we've heard for the last couple of weeks, you know, there are these migrant caravans that are getting started in the Triangle countries, heading north toward Mexico, toward the United States. And the administration is going, hey, now is not the time to come. Don't come now, but apparently sometime in the future will be okay.
Yeah, Steve, this issue is actually directly connected to the legislation Senator Romney and I want to introduce. There are 15 to 20 million illegal immigrants in this country. Joe Biden and the Democrats want to give them all amnesty and work authorization. At the same time, they're inviting millions of more people to cross our borders and come here and work.
It's
when we
nuts.
still have 10 million Americans out of work. It's crazy. Those jobs should go back to the Americans who lost those jobs during this pandemic. But to answer that question about sending the wrong signals to would-be migrants,
right.
Of course it sends the signal. Look, there are 25,000 people waiting in Mexico under the so-called Remain in Mexico policy. The Biden administration is now affirmatively going out and inviting them to come to the border and enter our country for claims that are likely to be denied, because asylum claims are denied 80% of the time, but they don't often get adjudicated for almost 2 years. And of course, all of these people are communicating with their friends and family members and others back in their home countries via social media. It is going to go viral. It is going to lead to another migrant surge at our southern border at a time when 10 million Americans are out of work, and we're still facing a global pandemic. You can't fly into this country without a negative coronavirus test, but it's fine to cross our border illegally.
Yeah, we can't go to school, but we can let in all of South America and Central America. It makes zero sense. Sorry, Ainsley.
That's okay.
Yeah, I mean, Joe Biden is keeping our schools closed, but our borders open.
Let's talk about Xavier Becerra, because he's the HHS pick under Biden, and I know he's going to have his hearing this week to determine whether or not he gets that job. You say he's been a disaster for California. Here's an ad that you put out against him.
Becerra supports Bernie's government takeover of your health care, eliminating your employer-provided coverage. Becerra defended California's disastrous lockdowns.
So give us some more detail about why you're not in favor of this.
Yeah, Xavier Becerra is a dangerous and unqualified radical. I mean, the Secretary of Health and Human Services traditionally is a doctor or a public health school leader or maybe a pharmaceutical executive. Xavier Becerra is just a partisan culture warrior. He spent 20 years in Congress, and as the Attorney General of California, he's been the enforcer for Gavin Newsom's lockdowns that have killed so many jobs in California. And furthermore, he's radical when it comes to health insurance. He will want to take away Americans' health insurance on the job, move the country towards a system of single socialized medicine out of Washington, D.C. If Xavier Becerra becomes the Secretary of Health and Human Services, I promise you that ad that you just played from me right now is going to be replayed across the country in the fall of 2022.
Right. We just got to get our country to this point, which between the immigration and that, you wonder what's going to be happening. Something else happened. You were one of the first people that came out over a year ago now and said, I got a problem with that Wuhan lab. And I think this virus is a lot worse than SARS, and I think the military had something to do with it. Now, I watched Matt Pottinger yesterday, the former Deputy National Security Advisor. He's got hooks when he was in the Wall Street Journal. He has a lot of contacts in China. He sounds exactly like something you would say. And then even Jake Sullivan, the National Security Advisor for President Biden, had this to say about China. Then he's bothered, and I'm heartened by this, that we still don't know nearly enough about this virus. Let's listen.
I also believe that we need a credible, open, transparent international investigation led by the World Health Organization. And they're about to come out with a report about the origins of the pandemic in Wuhan, China, that we have questions about, because we do not believe that China has made available sufficient original data into how this pandemic began to spread, both in China and then eventually around the world. And we believe that both the WHO and China should step up on this matter.
I love the fact that they're taking it back to China. Remember, Governor Cuomo said it's the European virus, and every time President Trump brought up China, they said it's a distraction. Now they're singing from your hymn book, and I'm heartened by that. Matt Pottinger said this: the problem was the Chinese Communist Party did not turn their CDC to deal with this crisis. They turned to their military, and our CDC did not have relations established with the Chinese military. So we were blind to this. Your thoughts?
Yeah, all that is right. It's disappointing that the Biden administration immediately rejoined the WHO, which has carried Chinese water on this for a year now. The so-called investigation the WHO recently conducted in Wuhan was no investigation at all. It didn't conduct any real examination. It was led by some European food safety expert. They even admitted that they didn't review any evidence. I mean, basically, they sat down for a cup of coffee with their friends at the Wuhan Institute of Virology and said, hey, are you guys so incompetent that you released a virus that caused a global pandemic? Oh, no? Okay, sounds good. We're going to leave. No questions asked. I mean, that's the quality of the so-called investigation that was conducted. China needs to be forthright and open. Until they do that, we shouldn't be rejoining the WHO, and we shouldn't be taking any tariffs or sanctions off of China for what they've done to this country.
We're still paying money to that lab, to research, the Wuhan lab, to American tax dollars. It's nuts.
It's totally nuts. And again, China has not been forthright from the very beginning. What could have been just a local health challenge in Wuhan turned into the worst global pandemic in a century because of Chinese communist duplicity and incompetence.
Senator, we'd like you to weigh in on an entertainment story. Disney Plus has labeled, I think, 18 episodes of the Muppets as having offensive content in it. One of them includes Johnny Cash in front of a Confederate flag. But they're running, obviously the lawyers have written a disclaimer on certain episodes, and they say, this program includes negative depictions and or mistreatment of people or cultures. These stereotypes were wrong then and are wrong now. Rather than remove this content, we want to acknowledge its harmful impact, learn from it, and spark conversation to create a more inclusive future together. So rather than get rid of that content, which is very expensive, they're putting that label at the beginning of it. What do you think about that?
Total Mickey Mouse move, guys. But seriously, I mean, Disney is putting these kind of disclaimers on the Muppets or other old movies in its catalog. Not removing them from Disney Plus because they don't want to lose the revenue from its subscribers. But at the same time, just last year, they thanked an agency of the Chinese Communist Party that is responsible for concentration camps and genocide in Xinjiang province, China, for helping them film a movie. It is outrageous and appalling. It's kind of what they did a few years back here in the United States. If you recall, they threatened to cut Georgia off as a site of filming and making movies because the Georgia legislature wanted to protect unborn children. Yet they're perfectly willing to work with Chinese communists who are responsible for genocide against their own people. It's really appalling.
Do you think we'll have a Muppets commission to look at this? Would it be bipartisan?
We might have to go through the entire Disney catalog, but it's not. Again, it's not just the Muppets. They've got disclaimers on all kinds of shows on that catalog, but they haven't taken those things down. They still want that $12.99 a month.
Senator Cotton, thanks for joining us.
Thank you all.